Hello everyone, I again welcome you all on my YouTube channel Success Pharma. Today in this video we will discuss about General Pharmacology Part 4. It includes Type 3 and Type 4 receptors. जैसे कि आपने फार्माकोलॉजी पार्ट 1 में ब्रांचेस ऑफ फार्माकोलॉजी, फार्माकोकाइनेटिक, फार्माकोडायनामिक, ड्रग एक्शंस एंड क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ ड्रग ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ सोर्सेस देखा था. एंड पार्ट 2 में आपने नॉमेनक्लेचर ऑफ ड्रग दैट इज केमिकल टाइप नॉमेनक्लेचर, नॉन प्रोप्राइटरी जेनेरिक अप्रूव्ड ऑफिशियल नेम एंड प्रोप्राइटरी ट्रेड एंड ब्रांड नेम, ये नॉमेनक्लेचर डिस्कस किया था. इसके साथ ही हमने ड्रग एक्शंस इन बॉडी, सो drug enter into the body and search the targets. So in our body there are 4 types of target: receptor, enzyme, ion channel and transporters. Let's start the video. Type 3 receptor, it is also known as enzyme receptor and receptor kinase. The structure and function is different from type 1 and type 2. As we know, type 1 is known as ion channel receptor, type 2 is known as GPCR receptors. So it is different from type 1 and type 2 receptors. These receptors mediate the action of protein mediators like growth factor, cytokine, insulin molecules. Means type 3 receptor mediates the action of these mediators. Next, effect are on gene expression and protein synthesis. So type 3 receptor mainly effective for the gene expression and protein synthesis. It is a single membrane spanning helical region associated to larger extracellular ligand binding domain. Means जो extracellular domain होगी वो NH2 terminal होगा and attached to the intracellular domain means COOH terminal or C terminal domain. It is linked to the enzymatic activity. Means extracellular domain से हमारी drug bind करेगी and intracellular domain से आपका जो effector है वो bind होगा. Now mechanism of enzyme linked receptor. So यहाँ पर आप देखेंगे कि ligand कैसे receptor से bind करेगा, then क्या mechanisms होगी और finally response आएगा. So first when the ligand is bind to the extracellular domain means NH2 domain. So ligand NH2 domain से bind करेगा, then receptor dimerization takes place. Means receptor is dimerized. So here's in second step dimerization of receptor takes place. After dimerization, autophosphorylation on tyrosine residue. So already the phosphorylated group is attached to the tyrosine residue and finally it leads to the response of that drug. Now some properties of type 3 receptor. The enzyme at cytosolic site means inside the cell, it is generally protein kinase. In type 3 receptor, the effector is always protein kinase, but in some cases it also be a guanylyl cyclase. Protein kinase phosphorylated tyrosine residue on the substrate protein. Means जो हमारा substrate protein होगा उसमें tyrosine residue phosphorylated होंगे and are called receptor tyrosine kinase. उस protein को हम receptor tyrosine kinase बोलेंगे. Example insulin, epidermal growth factor, nerve growth factor, receptors. So these 3 example are the example of tyrosine kinase receptor. Next, steps of receptor activation. So as we see in the last slide, the first step is dimerization of receptor molecule is called conformational changes which activate the kinase. Next one is the phosphorylation, that is autophosphorylation. So activated kinase autophosphorylated the tyrosine residue and cause phosphorylation leading to the response. Now receptor tyrosine kinase, it is also known as RTK. So RTK are able to regulate diverse cellular functions including metabolic reactions, cell proliferation, cell growth and differentiations. तो ये आपके लिए इम्पोर्टेंट है, ये याद रखना है. आरटीके के जो भी रेगुलेटरी सेलुलर फंक्शंस होते हैं, सो इट इंक्लूड सेल प्रोलिफरेशंस, cell growth and differentiations. Next, an important feature of this receptor is that their dimerizations also promote the receptor internalization. जैसे कि आपने लास्ट स्लाइड में देखा था रिसेप्टर dimerizations होता है. So that receptor dimerization also promote the receptor internalizations, degradation in lysosome and down regulation if activation is fast enough. जब बहुत ज्यादा एक्टिवेशन होता है तो sometimes down regulation is automatically on. Next is the receptor with intrinsic enzymatic activity. It is an important point, means the receptor with intrinsic activity. So answer is receptor-tyrosine-kinase. It also have intrinsic enzymatic activity. Now the mechanism of RTK, that is receptor-tyrosine-kinase. When the growth factor bind to the receptor-tyrosine-kinase, it work by three mechanisms. First is the MAP kinase signaling. Second one is the Jack state signaling. Third one is the PI3K AKT signaling pathway. So when the tyrosine kinase inhibitor bind to these pathway, it may inhibit the cell growth, cell survival, cell proliferation and differentiations. So it is useful for the cancer cases. Anti-cancer drug as a tyrosine kinase inhibitor. So here tyrosine kinase is play an important role in several cellular pathways. Jack state binding receptor. Jack state is a subtype of type 3 receptor. It is different from RTK, means receptor tyrosine kinase, in not having any catalytic domain. Agonist drug cause dimerization, alter the intracellular domain conformations to increase its affinity for cytosolic protein kinase JAK. Means जब भी कोई agonist drug टाइप 3 रिसेप्टर से और एंजाइम रिसेप्टर से बाइंड होगी, so dimerization of receptor is always takes place, which leads to the conformational change to increase its affinity for cytosolic JAK kinase. Now on binding, the JAK get activated and phosphorylated tyrosine residue of receptor, which now bind another free moving protein state. State means signal transducer and activator of transcription. Next, pair of phosphorylated state dimerize and translocate to the nucleus to regulate gene transcription, resulting in biological response. Simply आप ऐसे समझ सकते हैं, जब भी कोई एगोनिस्ट ड्रग टाइप 3 रिसेप्टर से बाइंड करेगी तो उसमें कुछ कन्फॉर्मेशनल चेंजेस आएंगे. दैट कन्फॉर्मेशनल चेंजेस इंक्रीज द अफिनिटी फॉर साइटोसोलिक टायरोसिन प्रोटीन काइनेज, दैट इज जैक. व्हेन जैक गेट एक्टिवेटेड, phosphorylated tyrosine residue of receptor now bind to the another proteins. means जैक प्रोटीन किसी दूसरे प्रोटीन से अटैच होगा. दैट second one protein is state protein, which is movable and free in cytosol. So when JAK is bind to the state, the pair of phosphorylated state dimerize and translocate to the nucleus. means dimerization होगा state proteins का and ये translocate होंगे nucleus में. that then it regulate the gene transcription, which finally result into biological response. So example of this type of receptor is cytokine, growth hormone and interferon etc. Now last one is type 4, that is nuclear receptor or steroid receptor. So the receptor is inherently capable of binding to a specific drug. means this type of receptor is bind to some type of specific gene or specific drugs. Simply इसकी mechanism आप ऐसे समझ सकते हैं, जब भी कोई hormonal drug कार्बोक्सी टर्मिनल ऑफ रिसेप्टर, मीन्स कार्बोक्सी टर्मिनल मीन्स लिगेंड बाइंडिंग डोमेन से बाइंड करेगा तो HSP प्रोटीन्स रिलीज होंगे. HSP इज अ हीट शॉक प्रोटीन 90 विच इज रिलीज ऑन बाइंडिंग ऑफ हार्मोन टू द दिस रिसेप्टर. Next, receptor dimerization takes place after HSP release, so receptor is dimerized. Then ligandated receptor dimer move to the nucleus. मीन्स जो ligand binded जो receptor है वो कहाँ मूव करेगा, न्यूक्लियस में, and bind to the another co-repressor और co-activated proteins. मीन्स न्यूक्लियस में जो भी co-repressor और co-activated proteins होंगे उससे हमारा receptor ligand complex bind होगा. These proteins are capable to alter gene functions. जब ये कोएक्टिवेटर प्रोटीन से बाइंड करेगा तो ये कैपेबल होगा कुछ जीन फंक्शन की अल्टरेशंस में। दिस कॉम्प्लेक्स अटैच टू द स्पेसिफिक डीएनए सीक्वेंसेस ऑफ टारगेट जीन। अब यह किसी टारगेट जीन से बाइंड करेगा एंड फैसिलिटेट द एक्सप्रेशन ऑफ स्पेसिफिक एमआरएनए इज सिंथेसाइज ऑन टेम्पलेट ऑफ जीन, और ये फाइनली एमआरएनए की सिंथेसिस में हेल्प करेगा ऑफ दैट जीन एंड एमआरएनए मूव टू द राइबोसोम्स। फाइनली जो एमआरएनए सिंथेसाइज्ड होगा वो राइबोसोम में मूव होगा एंड सिंथेसाइज स्पेसिफिक प्रोटीन्स विच रेगुलेट टारगेट सेल एक्टिविटी। एंड फाइनली कुछ ऐसे स्पेसिफिक प्रोटीन्स की सिंथेसिस होगी जो रेगुलेट करेंगे टारगेट सेल की एक्टिविटीज को। दिस डायग्राम इज फ्रॉम केडीटी. It represents operational scheme of intracellular receptor, that is nuclear receptor. So here G is for glucocorticoid. Glucocorticoid is bind to the steroidal binding domain near the carboxyl terminal. It release HSP. HSP heat shock protein 90. When HSP is releases, so this HSP is associated with the glucocorticoid receptor, that is GR. Now GR have two binding site. First one is the steroidal binding site and second one is the DNA binding site. तो यहाँ आपको ये याद रखना है, steroidal binding domain and DNA binding domain attached to a particular region. This region is known as Hing region. Now the GR having zinc fingers. Zinc finger is the loop-like structure of amino acid with chelated zinc ion. So it is known as zinc fingers. Next, when the glucocorticoid receptor is activated and release the HSP, it dimerize the receptor. So the receptor is moved into the nucleus and bind to the co-repressor and co-activators. Means after dimerization, it moves into the nucleus and attached to the co-activator and co-repressor proteins. When it attached to these proteins, it interact with the specific DNA sequences called glucocorticoid responsive element JRE. It attached to the JRE. Now when it interact with JRE, it shows the expression of gene which promote their transcriptions. So transcription means mRNA synthesis takes place, and after the synthesis of mRNA, it synthesizes the specific protein which regulate target cell activities and finally leads to protein synthesis which regulate final modification of cellular function. Now type 4 receptor have some examples like all steroidal hormones like glucocorticoid, mineralocorticoid, androgens, estrogens and progesterone. So all steroidal drugs are come under the type 4 receptors, and thyroxine, vitamin D, vitamin A also the example of type 4 receptors, that is nuclear receptor. So all four types, type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4 receptor are used as target for different types of drug, and type 1, type 2, type 3 are called as extracellular receptor and type 4 is known as intracellular receptor or nuclear receptor. थैंक यू. आई होप आपको मेरा ये वीडियो पसंद आया होगा. प्लीज इसे लाइक एंड शेयर जरूर करें. एट लास्ट, चलता रहूंगा पथ पर, चलने में माहिर बन जाऊंगा, या तो मंजिल मिल जाएगी या अच्छा मुसाफिर बन जाऊंगा. थैंक यू सो मच.